In the shadow of Glasgow's post-industrial decline, Ian McAteer's life began on November 12, 1961, in Dalmuir, a rough neighborhood where opportunity was scarce and survival was a daily struggle. Raised amidst decaying factories, desolate tenements, and an economic landscape that promised little for those born into its most vulnerable corners, Ian's early years were filled with turmoil. His mother, struggling with addiction and mental health issues, was often absent from the family home, leaving Ian and his 4 siblings to fend for themselves. The youngest of the siblings, Ian, was sometimes neglected, with no clear direction or support system. By the time Ian was a teenager, his life had already been shaped by the cold, unforgiving streets. The threat of violence, the lure of petty theft, and the constant struggle for basic necessities became his reality. Foster care came and went, but the trauma of instability never left. Ian quickly learned that the world was not a kind place, and the only way to carve out any sense of control was to take what he could, even if it meant taking from others. As he wandered through the streets, he became acquainted with an undercurrent of crime that flowed through the heart of Glasgow. Petty thefts and small-time robberies were his introduction to a life of survival. By the age of 14, Ian had learned the skills of the streets, how to pick pockets, how to lie, and most importantly, how to avoid the authorities. Every day he faced a world that seemed set against him, but in the face of this adversity, he discovered his greatest strength, the ability to blend into the shadows, unnoticed and untouchable. Ian's teenage years saw him deepen his involvement in petty crime. By the age of 16, he was already involved in a gang of local troublemakers. It wasn't the first step in a larger criminal enterprise, but for Ian, it felt like the first real opportunity to prove himself. It was a tough, violent world in which a person's worth was determined by their ability to intimidate, steal, and survive. To Ian, the gang represented a way to gain respect in a society that had shown him little. The gang was involved in small-time criminal activities: extortion, drug dealing, shoplifting, and car theft. It was a tight-knit group, bound together by survival instincts and a shared disdain for the establishment. Ian quickly learned that to survive, he had to remain unpredictable, quick to react, and above all, ruthless. The consequences of failure in this world were severe, and Ian had witnessed the punishment dealt out to those who faltered: beatings, betrayals, or worse, a violent end. The trust of his peers was everything, and Ian knew that to rise through the ranks, he had to prove his loyalty and his ability to get the job done. By the age of 18, Ian had earned his first reputation in the criminal world, a man who could take what he wanted without hesitation, but who also knew when to remain in the shadows. He had already begun engaging in more serious criminal activities, such as smuggling stolen goods and running errands for more powerful figures within Glasgow's underworld. It was during this time that Ian began to realize that to achieve true power, he needed to move beyond petty crime. The early 1980s were a time of transition in Glasgow, with the city teetering on the edge of economic collapse. As traditional industries faltered, a new wave of organized crime began to emerge. Opportunistic figures like Ian McAteer saw the crumbling economy as a chance to thrive. Drug trafficking, extortion, and the protection racket became lucrative businesses for those with the right connections and the courage to exploit the chaos. Ian's criminal enterprise began to expand as he connected with key players in Glasgow's growing drug trade. Heroin was beginning to flood the streets, and Ian seized the opportunity to align himself with powerful individuals involved in distribution. He quickly learned the mechanics of the drug trade: how to import, distribute, and sell narcotics without attracting too much attention. Ian's rise within the Glasgow criminal community was swift, with many seeing him as a figure to be reckoned with. He was a chameleon, able to blend into various social circles, whether among petty criminals or high-ranking figures in the drug underworld. But it wasn't just drugs that made Ian's empire grow. He quickly took control of several lucrative protection rackets, extorting local businesses and individuals who were desperate to avoid the violence that came with refusing to pay. It was during this time that he started to move in more dangerous circles, meeting with figures who controlled major operations in multiple cities, including Liverpool. Ian's ability to navigate this complex web of criminal connections soon earned him a reputation that stretched beyond Glasgow. His ambition knew no bounds, and he wasn't content with local notoriety. He sought power on a national level. As his criminal empire expanded, Ian was known for his ruthlessness and cunning. He built a network of loyal associates who feared and respected him. Violence was often the means by which Ian maintained control, and anyone who dared cross him paid the price. It was not uncommon for rival gang members or those who owed him money to disappear without a trace, their bodies never to be found. Despite his growing power and influence, Ian McAteer's life of crime was never without risk. His continued involvement in the drug trade, along with his growing list of violent offenses, eventually brought him to the attention of law enforcement. In 1993, after years of carefully orchestrated criminal activity, Ian was arrested and charged with multiple offenses related to drug trafficking and organized crime. The case against Ian was damning. The police had gathered enough evidence to convict him, and the media eagerly followed every twist and turn of his trial. Ian, ever the confident figure, made the decision to represent himself in court, a move that shocked both the prosecution and the public. His decision to defend himself only added to his notoriety, turning the trial into a spectacle that captivated the media. During the trial, Ian displayed his usual arrogance and defiance. He manipulated the courtroom with his charm and quick wit, often making light of the charges against him. But despite his efforts to evade the full weight of the law, the evidence against him was undeniable. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 5 years in prison. The media, hungry for a story, hailed it as the end of McAteer's reign, but Ian was far from finished. His time behind bars became a mere pause in his criminal career. The years following Ian's imprisonment were marked by an escalation in violence. Despite being locked away, he continued to exert control over his criminal operations from behind bars, orchestrating hits on rivals and ensuring that his empire did not crumble in his absence. The bloodshed, which had always been a part of Ian's world, reached a new peak during these years. Murders, assaults, and violent retributions became common as Ian solidified his position within Glasgow's criminal hierarchy. In 1999, a particularly brutal murder sent shockwaves through the criminal community. Warren Selkirk, a former associate who had become a liability due to his gambling debts, was lured into a trap and executed in a marina. The murder was carried out in a cold, clinical manner, a message to anyone who might think of crossing Ian McAteer. The details of the murder were chilling. It was a public execution, witnessed by Selkirk's children. The act was a statement of power, an unmistakable warning that Ian would stop at nothing to maintain control. As the bodies piled up, so did the tension. Law enforcement stepped up their efforts, but Ian's network of loyalists made it difficult for the authorities to make any significant progress in dismantling his operations. To the outside world, it seemed as though Ian McAteer had become invincible. His empire, built on violence, fear, and manipulation, showed no signs of crumbling. In the years following his conviction, Ian McAteer's life began to take a strange turn. In 2011, a charity event at HMP Shotts, a treadmill marathon to raise funds for the Royal Hospital for Sick Children, was organized, and Ian, along with fellow criminal Jamie Stevenson, participated. It was a curious moment, a stark contrast to the violent, ruthless persona that Ian had cultivated over the years. To some, it was a sign of redemption, a rare act of humanity in an otherwise dark life. To others, it was a cynical attempt to soften his image, a move to distance himself from his bloody past. The media coverage of the event was mixed, with some praising Ian for his charitable gesture, while others saw it as a hollow attempt at public relations. Regardless of public opinion, Ian's participation in the event marked a shift in the way his legacy was viewed. It was no longer just about violence and fear. There were cracks in the armor, moments that suggested there was more to Ian McAteer than the man behind the crimes. Ian McAteer's life is a complex one, marked by contradictions. He is a product of a broken system, a victim of circumstance who rose to power through violence and intimidation. But he is also a symbol of resilience, someone who carved out his own path in a world that offered him little. His rise to power, fueled by his criminal ingenuity and ruthless nature, will forever be remembered as one of the most striking examples of how a man can shape his own fate, no matter how brutal or bloody the path. His legacy is one of fear, but also of mystery. The questions surrounding his life, what drove him, what made him so relentless, will continue to linger. Ian McAteer's name will forever be synonymous with the darkness of Glasgow's underworld. His life serves as a warning. Power gained through fear and violence comes at a terrible price, and it leaves behind a legacy of suffering that stretches far beyond the individual. That is our video for today. Like and subscribe and let us know in the comments section what you think of today's story, and I will see you on the next video.